Story is about something that's familiar to virtually everyone, something familiar in daily life that's certainly not automatically political, although right now it is a pretty current and direct sign of economic problems that this new administration has not fixed. I am talking about eggs.
In the country or in town, going up or coming down, on the sidewalk, on the grass, fading back to throw a pass, on a sailboat or a bus, when there's just the two of us, the incredible edible egg.
Anytime, any place, reach for an egg. They're versatile, economical, highest quality protein. You can always use eggs, so keep enough on hand.
The incredible edible egg.
Incredible. Now, many animals lay eggs, which can be eaten. They can last in fertilized form until they hatch. Humans have actually eaten animal eggs for nourishment for tens of thousands of years. There are indications of that in ancient rock art, long before chickens were domesticated and people started more formal farming in the past few hundred years. Today, eggs actually remain a staple in Western diets. They're popular, they're high in protein, as we just heard, they're heralded for their taste. And everybody knows their versatility, hard-boiled or poached, scrambled or fried, even deviled, a practice that we checked that actually dates all the way back to ancient Rome. Now, eggs come from chickens. The ongoing bird flu is ravaging the chicken population, driving up egg prices from about $2 for a dozen eggs last fall to now $8. Yikes. It's a big jump. And while overall inflation has continued from, of course, the prior administration, and while President Trump has only been in office for 1 month, this is one of the promises he has not kept yet.
A vote for Trump means your groceries will be cheaper.
Your groceries will be cheaper. As of now, they're not. Indeed, instead, grocery prices are going up so much that even mainstays like Denny's and other restaurants are raising their prices, adding egg surcharges for this situation. More on Denny's in a moment, but some consumers are now bracing with this problem and searching for different ways to find cheaper eggs. I can mention to you many cities boast avid smokers who sometimes will buy a single cigarette rather than what can be a very expensive pack. Those are known as loosies. I tell you the news, but that's not news if you've been around smokers in cities in many parts of the world. But here's what is new. In Manhattan, some delis are selling loosies for eggs. Come on now. That's got to be some kind of hard times, right? So more and more Americans are sharing their concern about egg prices. This hits everyone. People, as you know these days, I mentioned we covered this in the election where we heard from people who might not be glued to the news on their phones, but they are experiencing life, and sooner or later they post or interact with things online. So on TikTok, we've seen this, people invoking Donald Trump's many vows to lower exactly these kind of prices.
What? Oh, nothing. I'm just wondering how you're doing with those egg prices. Well, here you are asking about the egg prices. You know that there's the bird flu going on, and that is Biden's fault. I'm just saying that the availability of eggs and the price is not President Trump's fault. Oh, you mean the prices of eggs that y'all definitely said were Vice President Harris's fault during the campaign trail?
Now a dozen eggs will cost you around $4 thanks to Kamala Harris's inflationary policies.
Didn't Trump say on day one he was going to lower prices?
Didn't he say that? He did.
And I went on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, you know, who uses the word? I started using the word, the groceries.
A vote for Trump means your groceries will be cheaper.
It'll also bring your grocery bill way down. I have more complaints on groceries.
Now, those grocery bills, they're not down, they're not level, as you're seeing from the reporting, and the prices, they're up. And Americans are feeling this with reminders that, of course, reflect the problem, as well as Trump's lack of any solution so far, which brings us, as mentioned, to something that people live. This is not partisan politics. This is how things are going in the real world when you're out living your life if you want to, for example, get a reasonably priced meal at a mainstay like Denny's.
The 2468 value menu is back for a limited time.
Major chains like Denny's now joining the food fight, confirming that some of their restaurants will temporarily add a surcharge to every meal that includes eggs, calling the move a fluid situation, joining other breakfast staples like Waffle House. And at the supermarket, when you can find the coveted cartons, some stores like Trader Joe's and Costco are limiting the amount customers can buy at any one time.
We're talking about egg rations now. That's not popular. And it's not exactly wartime America. And you see different companies, different stores scrambling to keep up with this. Now, it reinforces the high prices and the economic anxieties which animated so much of the campaigning last year. Now, if you follow the facts, this set of developments does not mean that all problems under the Trump administration are somehow caused by the Trump administration. Indeed, I can say to you tonight, America, the question is often asked: which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or as one poet put it, dealer or victim, I beg, what came first, moving chickens or the egg? Well, tonight's question is related. What came first? The bird or the egg prices? The bird flu or these cracked eggs of budget cuts? The metaphor may be difficult. The answer is simple. Bird flu did come first, along with wider rising prices over the past few years. And that, of course, is before Trump's election. But just as Trump struggled in his first term with the COVID response, he is struggling with this part of the job already now. Nonpartisan financial outlets, again, no agenda against MAGA, but they're reporting on President Trump's clear lack of interest in governing or solutions on these type of challenges. Trump's mass firings, gutting the expert staff that, for example, was doing bird flu response, which Bloomberg calls a stunning bureaucratic measure of incompetence, so blatant they're now, quote, scrambling to hire back some of those workers they fired. And food safety is the government's job, whether Trump finds that interesting or not, whether that drives the right press coverage or not. Trump and Musk continue to test the limits of how to fire all kinds of people, including the experts who do this work, who have the expertise, who are on the job. So Trump and his staff, in this case Musk, will be held accountable sooner or later for the results. More broadly, these are problems that come as the American consumer confidence is sinking, the largest monthly drop in over 4 years. So that shows concerns beyond even these recent economic problems under the past administration. Now, everyone knows voters famously hold presidents accountable for the economy. That's why President Bush could literally win a war and then quite quickly lose an election. It's why James Carville's maxim, "It's the economy, stupid," has endured for decades. Even as everything around us, from politics to media to technology, seems to be changing, we still hear, and boy, does it still ring true, "It's the economy, stupid." A lot of experts say those high prices over the last couple of years drove an inflated or higher opposition to the Biden-Harris administration. And that helped Trump eke out his 1.5-point national win just late last year. So what came first? The chicken of this Trump second term or the egg of high prices? It's a tortured metaphor for a tortured time. And people seem angry in red districts and these protests as they watch President Trump come back after everything I just showed you and all those promises and then side with billionaires and plan tax cuts and firing all these people, some of whom are working on your food safety, others who might just be your neighbor, your fellow peer. Just a lot of firings. And all of that being prioritized over any apparent effort to fulfill the campaign vows about the prices and the economy. And let's be clear. I've told you before, there's a valid debate about the size of government or future budgeting. Congress is having budgeting discussions tonight about the future. But taking people who've already been hired to do these jobs in a bipartisan process and firing them all indiscriminately and cutting all these jobs across America, well, it doesn't play well even if, as Musk likes to say, they're government jobs, like that's automatically worse. Note what you see on your screen. The Trump-Musk effort targets over 900,000 jobs across red states alone. The impact there, if you want to look at it politically, is broad. And people are already, even in this algorithmically challenged spin world we're in, somehow people are getting the facts that so many of the cuts were so incompetent they had to be reversed, which means if you only believe Donald Trump, you still found out that Donald Trump and his administration did something really wrong recently, because now they're doing the opposite. And that's what some of these headlines show. So we're seeing the beginning of a partial backlash. The layoffs playing poorly for one Republican congressman in Missouri who actually stood up and faced the public, which is somehow how we know this. Imagine how many are just hiding out or trying to avoid moments like this. And I want you to note before I play this for you, this is a district where the Republican didn't win by 1.5 points like Trump's national margin or 5 or 10. The Republican in the district here won by 45 points and is now getting booed.
There are jobs available. God has a plan. You are not a victim, you are a victor. And you will be able to get another job and provide for yourself and your family. I'm confident of that.
We are the hardworking federal employees that make this government run every single day. Yep. And we are being discounted by those in Washington.
Real people facing this, talking back. And again, you can do all the spinning online that you want, but sooner or later, when you're talking about real-world impacts from food and nuclear safety to those people I just showed you, out in communities, out in those red states I just showed you, and blue and purple, people will hear about this. This is part of our lived reality, just like the egg prices. Now, Elon Musk is pushing a very particular attack on federal workers. It has an argument to it. And again, there's been many debates about bureaucracies and the so-called, quote, deep state, and many of these things have different ideological angles. But let me tell you how it works here. Musk is trafficking in a very specific attack, which argues federal workers are basically illegitimate and expendable. They must justify themselves by email to his billionaire demands, which implies that somehow otherwise they'd be unjustified. Say you're doing bird flu research or nuclear safety. Now you got to turn around and spend time writing down to Elon Musk what you do on the nukes like he understands it. That's a demand even the Trump White House backed off of. But the Republicans' top leader in the Senate is also breaking with the Musk messaging. I want you to notice this. It's not, you're not going to see some giant thing where he calls out the president he has to work with by name or Elon Musk, but he made a point to break with this and advocate more respect for the people doing the work.
I think that any process you undergo where you're trying to find efficiencies, and if that involves some reductions in force, it needs to be done in a respectful way. Anything that they do, they need to be respectful of people that are involved in these agencies and departments of government.
That's a disagreement with what's coming out of the Trump-Musk cuts and the justification for it. It reminds you that these arguments still matter. They wouldn't be having them if they thought they could just do this all and get away with it and not explain themselves. It suggests a possible crack between the Trump-Musk agenda and Congress, including Republicans, while the federal workers I mentioned are part of these wider protests we're seeing. And some of the Republicans who still say they want Donald Trump to succeed are warning how doing these cuts the wrong way or too broadly can actually stop the Republican Party in its tracks. You know, Elon Musk might not have been following U.S. politics back then, but Bush's second-term momentum was hobbled very infamously by the failed effort to change and cut Social Security. Social Security is just a very popular part of the long-term safety net, along with Medicaid. And former Trump campaign chair Steve Bannon is well aware of the risks exactly on this point.
Get into Medicaid. Medicaid, you got to be careful because a lot of MAGAs on Medicaid. I'm telling you, if you don't think so, you are dead wrong. Medicaid's going to be a complicated one. Just can't take a Medex to it, although I would love to.
He'd love to, but politically, he doesn't want Trump, who he helped elect the first time back when he had smaller support in the party, and the Republicans that Bannon works with now. He doesn't want them to lose their power in a quest that would also fail. Taking a big risk like Bush did and not getting the thing you want is usually ineffective politics and governance. So that's kind of a lot. here we are. In all reality, it is way too early to tell whether some of these voters have a full-blown buyer's remorse for Trump. There are signs of concern from the politics you just saw, to the widening anger, to the huge crash in consumer confidence. But if it's not buyer's remorse, it's definitely sticker shock, with some consumers in need of retail therapy for their choices, from the shopping market to the political markets. And it's no secret that most people in the United States, if you peel away all the partisan stuff, and remember where we started last year, most people opposed the political choices being offered at the beginning of that year and through most of the campaign. We reported that at the time. I even made a Daft Punk reference about one more time and showed the polling that majorities in both parties wanted other choices. And so faced with that choice, and then, of course, the late swap that we got, so instead of the Biden-Harris agenda, you got the Harris agenda with limited time, people veered towards Trump for a bundle of reasons that included what I'm reminding you of tonight, what we saw from real people in those protests and those videos. It included the promise, the reasoning for what was a 1.5-point election was change and lower prices. Well, here we are just over a month in, and people are not getting lower prices yet. And many are finding these indiscriminate cuts, from food safety to nuclear safety to all of their peers in all of those red states, hardworking people losing jobs and having less money to spend in their local economies. People are finding that is not the change they had in mind. So we have two experts on this and the price of eggs when we come back in 90 seconds.
Goal is to try to improve the proper functioning of government. It's not to tear down the agency.
The IG Act calls for us to take a look at issues of fraud, waste, and abuse, to prevent and detect that, and to promote economy and efficiency.
I think that this should be an alarm to all Americans, but in particular Congress.
Those are the people across the bipartisan tradition of decades who are empowered to make sure the United States government is dealing with waste, fraud, and abuse, and also avoiding mistakes, malfeasance, and partisan disruptions in the government. They are what are called inspectors general. And never have so many been ousted all at once, including by people who claim they actually still want to deal with waste, fraud, and abuse. So we are joined tonight by a very special guest. Robert Storch was the Inspector General for the Defense Department. Big job. Joins us now along with Vanity Fair's Molly Jong-Fast. Welcome to both of you. I mentioned the IGs, and we're obviously going to get to that, but Molly, change, lower prices, and a lot of people, including in red districts, saying they're not getting either.
Yeah, and let's remember that they are working in the Congress right now on one big, beautiful bill, which, if it passes, will do $880 billion of Medicaid cuts over 10 years.
Right, which goes to what Bannon was talking about.
So, in fact, not only are things going to get more expensive, but there's also going to be less money for those people to pay for it, because it's also cuts in SNAP. And remember, Medicaid cuts will mean, like, cuts to rural hospitals. That will mean cuts to nursing homes. It's hard to, like, envision what that means, but it will mean big changes for a lot of red states.
Are eggs too expensive?
Well, I think a lot of people are saying that, and what we're seeing, especially I talked to Leader Jeffries' office today, and their message to sort of the Democrats in the House now is go out and talk to people, because you're seeing all of these protests, right? You're seeing DOGE protests, and in fact, they were tracking all these, 22 different protests in swing districts.
Mm-hmm. We have some of these federal workers who are on Capitol Hill today. Let's take a listen to that.
This is so politically motivated and not actually motivated by real conversations that could be happening about how we make our government programs better.
We're here for safety, and we're patriots. We love our country. That's why we're taking these jobs that don't pay us in the private sector. I'm an accountant. I could get a private sector job tomorrow, but I care about this country and I want to be here.
Molly, what you also see here is the big difference between the political campaign, the politicians, the professionals, and how deep these cuts are hitting regular people. And so you can paint a picture of a bureaucrat, and we're about to hear from Robert, or you can hear from one and be reminded of who's doing this work. And again, I'm not here to take some stance one way or the other, but in reporting it, we're hearing from a lot of people who sound like teachers and firefighters and other folks you recognize from your daily life in your community, which seems to undercut Musk's main rationale, which is this faceless deep state bureaucracy argument.
Right. And remember, 30% of the federal government are these veterans. So you are firing a disproportionate amount of veterans.
Yeah.
And I think there are like intended consequences to, you know, they want to shrink the federal government. But then there are all these unintended consequences. Like when you look at the NIH funding freeze, like the largest employer in the state of Alabama is the university. So when you start freezing funds in Alabama, you start putting people out of work in Alabama. You start hurting the economy in Alabama.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing all over. You know, this will have unintended consequences, which will ripple into our economy, into the private markets, you know, things that aren't, I don't think they quite see how this is going to play.
The former Pentagon IG, Robert Storch, is here. It would seem, putting party aside, that administrations that are serious about this type of government oversight would generally want IGs on the job. And there's a practice for removing them if somebody fails, 1, 2, or 3. What does it tell us, though, when there is apparently a widespread purge of many IGs?
Well, it's incredibly troubling, obviously. So as you pointed out, there were a total of 18 inspectors general who essentially were purged on a Friday night by email from the Office of Presidential Personnel. No effort made to comply with the Inspector General Act, which has very clear provisions about notifying Congress in advance, at least 30 days notice, and explaining the reasons. Look, we can be fired. I've been honored to be appointed by 2 presidents. I first was nominated by President Trump, and I served as the NSA IG for just short of 5 years in that role. As a Trump nominee, then I was honored to be nominated by President Biden to be the DOD IG, and I served a little over 2 years in that role before receiving that emails.
What do you want to say to President Trump now, just on the facts? As you say, with notice or with more compliance, there's a process for this. If we're going to be rational about that. And yet he did pick you through his administration once before, and now they're doing this. What do you want him to know?
Well, the concern is that it sends a chilling message to oversight, right? It indicates or it suggests a lack of receptiveness to the very real benefits of independent oversight. I used to tell my folks all the time, so much of what we do in the IG community is of partisan interest. It's critically important that we be nonpartisan in our oversight work. And that's what enables us to do that hard-hitting work. And that's what makes it credible with the American people.
Do you think that the Pentagon right now is better or worse off for dealing with goals of saving money and targeted cuts without an experienced IG?
So we still have teams, the IGs still have people across government who are working. But when you take out the heads of the office, it creates a risk of chilling that sort of work. And if you have any doubts about that, in the lead-in, you had the video of Paul Martin, highly respected Inspector General at NASA for something like 14 years, and then for the last 14 months, I believe, at USAID. And he came out a couple weeks after the 18 of us were fired. He came out with a report that pointed out some significant concerns about the implications of some of the administration's actions with regard to USAID, things like risks of food spoiling on the docks and being diverted and things like that, right? So IG Martin comes out with that report. Next day, he's fired.
Yeah.
With no explanation at all. And
right, which, as you said, chills and sends a message to the people working under him, right? If the top person can't be the heat seeker, the protector in these things, and you're telling sometimes very powerful people things they don't want to hear, they don't want published, which is why we have this oversight. It's why a longtime Republican Grassley was such a supporter of this. Do you think Elon Musk has all the necessary knowledge about how the Pentagon works to make multi-billion or trillion-dollar cut recommendations?
So I haven't been there, and so I only know what I've seen in the media, right? And what I've read online. What I can say is, in the IG community, we have people who are very talented oversight professionals, auditors, investigators across the board. They know the departments and agencies in which they're working.
I'm only going to push you. Imagine we're in one of our, depositions. His argument is he knows how to do stuff. He'll figure this out and do it. So I'm curious, with you having done the work, whether you think that is a reasonable, fair plan, or sounds like trying to do that across multiple agencies, including the Pentagon, might be overwhelming.
Well, I don't think it had to be an either-or proposition. The IGs reached out. Mike Ware, the chairman of the Council of Inspectors General, reached out on multiple occasions to DOJ to try to engage and say, hey, look, if you want to go after waste, fraud, and abuse, that's what we do in the IG community, right? That's our bread and butter. Let's meet, let's coordinate, all that sort of stuff. My understanding is never even got a response back.
Yeah, which is kind of a tell. Before I let you go, they kept the DOJ IG, right?
Yep.
Do you know why?
I don't. I had the privilege to serve as his deputy when I was at the Department of Justice. And I always say he's the gold standard. And frankly, I think every day he's in office is a good day.
Yeah, so you don't view it as, and I'm asking because you're really in it. We're talking about Horowitz. You don't view it as an automatically suspicious thing. I mean, they took out a lot of people, and you just mentioned, and others have reported the concern about that as a possibly corruptive motive. But that doesn't necessarily reverse, in your mind, to an indictment of anyone who stayed.
No, I don't know the rationale behind what happened. What I'm concerned about is the law is very clear. You can remove an inspector general, but there are reasons for the law. There's a way to do it properly. And ultimately, as an inspector general, our job is to support the law and to enforce it. So I did that before as a prosecutor for years, a lawyer like you. I did it in the inspector general community, and I haven't stopped doing it now.
Yeah, no, you've walked the walk. You've served, as mentioned, in multiple administrations. I'd love to have you back. The final question is going to Molly, and it's a gift to you, Robert, that I'm not, because you're a new guest. You're new to this environment. I'm not going to hit you with this question, okay? That's my gift to a first-time guest. Molly, are you ready?
No. No, I'm not ready.
Molly, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
I knew it was going to be this. I don't feel comfortable making that kind of.
You don't have enough history on that.
No, I don't have enough history on that.
A lot of people think it's the egg.
Read in.
So a lot of people think it's the egg.
Yes.
Because then the chicken comes out of it.
Right.
But other people say,
where can the egg come from without a chicken?
Well, didn't the chicken lay it? Yeah.
Yes.
That's the whole thing of it.
The mystery of the ages.
I checked into this today, as we do. We have a whole team. We work and we research together. The first known reference to this was in Aristotle's, right?
Yes, Aristotle. There you go.
All right.
Here's some stuff.
Robert, she ducked. She didn't even answer.
Right? Tough question.
That's right.
Yeah, it's not my question.
There's no answer to it.
All right. Molly Jong-Fast, a good sport. Robert Storch, we hope you come back.
Pleasure.
We're also following, thank you so much. We're also following tonight the blowback on the partisans and even election deniers going into DOJ. We just discussed some aspects of that. And later, a juror on a key January 6th. The #2 post at the FBI, the Trump administration has installed a right-wing podcaster, Dan Bongino. NBC News reporting that FBI agents, the rank and file, are dismayed. He's made many outrageous claims. He's seen as a media entertainer with some law enforcement background, not in the FBI. This is what he said in 2022 about a lawful search by FBI agents of Mar-a-Lago.
Fire every single person involved in political targeting of Donald Trump. Fire everyone. It's the only way. The evidence of a corrupted FBI is everywhere.
The Washington Post reporting that FBI agents view these two people now running the FBI as the folks who might use the FBI to carry out potentially improper or even unlawful directives from the White House. Now, Politico reports that you've got the acting DAG, Emile Beauvais, who wants to use the legal system for the president's aims, while the top U.S. attorney in D.C. faces backlash for basically saying the exact opposite of the role you have there, describing himself as Donald Trump's own lawyer rather than serving at taxpayer expense for the American people. The DOJ has also ousted the prosecutors who worked on the January 6th case, two of them speaking out.
Why were you fired?
Because I did my job. I got fired because I did exactly what I was supposed to do.
I think we know what we did was right. No regrets. Absolutely none.
What we did was justice.
And in how many of your cases was the defendant acquitted?
None.
None.
Which tells you what?
The evidence was overwhelming.
Overwhelming evidence to convict those people. Then Donald Trump released them all, which, remember, well, a lot of folks have a lot of different agendas. The 83% on your screen is American unity. Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, overwhelming opposition to pardoning the people who stormed the Capitol that day. I want you to keep that in mind because there are a lot of things going on and we try to cover a lot of them and we make those judgments. This is one of those slow burning stories that just exists in the background because all those convictions came in, people lived through it, we know what happened, and then he pardoned them all, one of the greatest abuses of the pardon power in modern history. Until it happened, it was almost unthinkable that you would pardon people who attacked police, who stormed the Capitol. Remember, on January 6th and 7th, Trump and his allies were still claiming it was an inside job or it was Antifa liberals. Why? Because it was so obviously bad, so criminal, they wanted to blame it on someone else. Now we live in a country where Donald Trump, as president, has embraced it, even as 8 out of 10 Americans, with all of that spin out there, still say no. This was